You are listening to Rip It Up, the renovations podcast.
Hi, I'm Kate. I run the Instagram page Victorian Math Mine.
And I'm Jenny. I run the Instagram account Workers Cottage.
This podcast is all about renovation and interiors from the renovator's perspective. We've been through it a few times between us and it hasn't scared us off.
In fact, we loved it. So if you are planning to do up your own home, you can expect to hear lots of advice from our own experience, along with plenty of tips and inspiration. This is episode 9 and we are joined by Rachel and Alan, professional painters and founders of Farrelly Co, a new Irish paint company. They are here to answer all of your listener submitted questions about painting and colours. Welcome back to the pod. Hi Kate.
Hi Jen.
And hi Rachel and Alan from Farrelly Co Paint. So anyone who listened to a couple of episodes previously, we did an episode on paint colours. And we got so many questions.
So many questions. I don't think I've ever gotten as much of a response to a question box.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to know about paint and colours because, as I told you in my last episode, I messed up in my first house.
Yeah.
Paint colours.
Majorly. Your purple bedroom.
A pink and purple house. My husband was displeased, to say the least.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And it's hard. There's so much in it. It's such a huge topic. It's one thing that every single person in every single house has to battle with. And there's a million billion paint colours, as we discovered in our last colours. And here to bring us more paint colours.
So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Okay, so we put out a question on Instagram and lots of you sent them in. So we have collated all of these. We're going to drill Rachel and Alan. You're going to get so much information and tips about what to do if you're painting your house from this episode. Let's dive in.
Yeah. So tell me, who are Farrelly Co?
Who are we?
Sure, yeah, good question.
So we're a premium residential painting company based in Dublin. So we were in Australia for a few years. We came back right before COVID hit. Luckily, we managed to escape. And we set up Farrelly Co then in early 2020.
Yeah.
Initially as a restoration high-end painting company. And then in the last 2 years, we have also developed our own paint brand as well. So it's non-toxic, vegan, really, really pigmented, which I know we'll go into a bit later on.
We love that.
Yeah, we love pigment. But yeah, so that's kind of who we are.
Yeah, I suppose we're husband and wife as
Oh, yeah,
well,
we
which is a
husband
side
and
note.
Don't forget that. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
And we talked about in our first paint episode, your peel and stick samples. Revolutionary.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Makes
They are
such a difference.
Yeah.
Not painting huge squares all over your walls.
Yeah. And the feedback on them has been absolutely amazing. So they are peel and stick samples. We initially had them in the A5, but then we increased to the A4 after a bit of feedback. Obviously, the bigger the sample, the better. And so they're made with real paint. And I know we spoke about it before, but often when you're putting samples up on walls, you're putting them over other colours. So this immediately eliminates the colour that's already behind it. So straight away, you can see what the colour is going to look like. More true, exactly, yeah.
And what I love as well is that you can bring it from room to room. So if you're painting a sample on a wall, that might look fantastic in your kitchen that has a lovely south-facing window and it's a certain colour. And then
At
you
9
go
in the morning.
At 9 in the morning.
Yeah.
And then you go and you paint your living room, which you just haven't tested that sample in. And it can be a completely different colour.
Yes, exactly. And that's so important. Like we always say, move that sample around every hour, move it every hour, bring it to all the different rooms until you are 100% sure that is the color, because it can just be so different from Instagram to your friend's house to your living room. It's so important to just keep moving them around until you find the color that you like.
Yeah.
So we had a million questions,
A million billion
questions.
Yeah.
Like Jen said. So let's kick into those because we have a lot to get through. And one that came up time and time again. My painter tells me that Farrow Ball is shit paint and this paint is good. So tell me, Alan, what makes good paint to paint with? What makes bad paint?
I suppose what makes good paint for a painter is to be able to stand behind the coverage of it. So when a painter knows that they can get away with, is a term in the painting industry, if they can get away with 2 coats with this certain brand, they're not going to steer to another brand because they haven't got as much trust in it.
Gotcha.
So that would be my understanding of it. Also, we have found that we've had painters message us and they'd say, God, how are you using all that Farrow Ball or all that little green in a house? It's so expensive. But we'd always say, well, the client is paying for it. You're not paying for it. So the client so it's the client's expense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's an expense thing, and then maybe it's just what you're used to.
Yeah.
And in the
Preference.
grand scheme of things, it's not that expensive relative to other finishes in your house. And it has such a major impact.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you can stand by like the pigment in the, let's say, more expensive paints, the coverage is phenomenal. So
It's
I
the
mean,
longevity as well. And because
Absolutely.
there's always cost needs to be taken in consideration over years, how long
Yeah.
you're going to be living in the house. So
Yeah.
if you have, maybe there's a bit more of an upfront expense, but if that's going to last way longer or get better coverage than something else,
Yeah.
then it's not more expensive at all actually in the long
And I
run.
think you touched on it in the colour episode. What you're paying for is the pigment. So
Yeah.
although maybe it is more of an upfront cost, it's going to take less time to apply, which means your painter is going to charge less and it's going to last longer. So although it is a more upfront expense, it's worth it in the end.
and I think what you got to remember here is, like you said, it is minimal, because if you're going with a full renovation, all the work or all the money that's gone into underneath the foundations and all of this, and then an extra few €100, you should go that extra mile for the longevity of
And
it.
when you look at it per square meter,
Yeah.
it's probably quite a small cost
Absolutely.
relative to
Yeah.
like 100 per square meter you might spend on tiles or in wood
Yeah.
flooring or something like that. Like,
That's very true.
yeah, I think it's an important coverage
Yeah.
area that people kind of forget about sometimes.
Definitely.
Okay, so you think expensive paint brands are worth it? Have you found any kind of like budget ones that you think are good?
Maybe
Give us
if someone's doing up their house and they're not 100% sure about the colour, they want something that might last a year or two, and then they'll really decide.
The lower end, we would say Fleetwood is quite good value for money.
Okay.
I have that in my exterior, my house exterior, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
To us, they're very good value for money. Then Colourtrend would be another middle of the road value wise. I think it's quite good. Yeah.
Okay.
My house is head to toe in colour. I love it. I love it.
Is colour matching ever good? Like, do you think it's ever true to the original colours?
It's to answer that question. No, it's not true. It's probably 90%. Some shops might get it really close for you, but then they always have a caveat to me. They say, "Are you matching up to, like, if I'm painting one cabinet door, are you matching up to the original color? Because it's going to stand out like a sore thumb.
Right.
But maybe to the naked eye, when you go in, you go, oh, that is X, but it doesn't ever.
No, it doesn't. I think also most people choose a colour because they love the colour. So it's hard then if you are going to colour match it. There's some really good colour matches and there's some really bad colour matches. So if you love a colour and the reason you're choosing that is not for the quality of the paint or because you love the brand, you love the colour, the safest thing is just to buy the original. You know, like
yeah.
Yeah, because I guess a lot goes into that in R&D, right? In a paint company. I mean, it's really all about what color is it at the end of the day, and then things like coverage. Of course, it's really important when somebody's putting it on, but you're buying it for the color, so get the right color.
And I think with the colour matching, it's the undertones that tend to be slightly off. And then even when we were doing our development, like you'd be looking at colours and immediately because the undertone wasn't what you wanted, you didn't like that colour. You know, because it just plays such a difference.
So I might explain this one because undertones is kind of a difficult enough concept. I wrote an article about this and it was ages researching it. The idea is that every single colour is a result of at least two colours being mixed together to make that colour. Everyone cast your mind back to primary school when you've got Morla and you're mixing them together and you've got your blue and your yellow and it makes green. So if you have a bit more blue, it's kind of more of a bluey green. If you have a bit more yellow, it's more of a yellowy green. And then as colours get more complex, because there are billions of them, you could be mixing 2, 3, 4 colours together. And so you could have what maybe, looks like an off-white, but has a bit of brown underneath it, or a bit of purple as paint covered underneath it.
Yeah.
Or, a bit of yellow, as we all used to love in Irish homes back in the day. So it's so important because it's not really just one colour.
No. And there's such I suppose confusion around undertones as well. Like when people that's a question that we would get a lot of time. So like what white would you pair with the wall colour? Well, it depends obviously the undertone of your wall colour before you then decide on everything else in the room. But yeah, there's a huge mystery about undertone, but it's so important. And in the colour matching in particular, it's like if the warm undertone and then it's like more lilac or pink, completely throws off everything else.
Yeah.
It was funny. I had this brown paint. I think it's called Tudor brown. It's a really deep brown, right? And I was just painting an attic space and I just needed like whatever coverage. I was like, I'll use it up. And I thought if I put a little bit of that into white, what colour would you think you'd get? Like,
A light brown?
A light brown. A light brown, exactly. What colour did it come out?
Pinky.
Lilac. Like
No way.
really
Wow.
vivid, like purple.
Oh my
like really
God.
purpley lilac. And I was like, wow, it just showed like what undertones were in that brown,
Yeah.
even though it was a really deep chocolate brown.
Just
I just thought that was
interesting,
really interesting,
yeah.
yeah.
So I wonder, is that a tip then for listeners? If you're wondering, if you're buying a paint sample and you're curious about what undertones are in it, I'd given advice before to hold it up to a primary colour, and it's kind of easy to see, is it leaning more yellow, leaning more blue, whatever. But actually maybe you could just take a tiny bit of it and mix it in with some
Dilute it
white,
down.
and that will give you
Yeah.
a good sense of what the undertones are
Yeah.
if you're testing it. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a clever.
Kind of a cheap
Hack.
tin of white paint. Yeah, life hack. You're here first, listeners. Exclusive tip. Let us know if it works. I haven't actually tried this.
Yeah, exactly.
So you guys are experts in kind of old houses as well. And a lot of people have asked us about breathable paint, and I've been told I need to use breathable paint. Like, what does that mean? And like, can I use any paint? Is there certain ones now that are water-based or not?
Yeah, so lime plaster is, I suppose, temperamental, and it needs a little bit of TLC, and those homes need to breathe.
Yeah.
So a breathable paint, most paints have a breathable technology in them. However, conservation technology up there near Bluebell, they have what's called airborne clay paint,
Okay.
and when specified, we would use that. That's what we would lean towards.
Yeah.
Generally, it's the conservation technologists would tell us that it's on the exterior walls of a period home,
Yeah.
and not necessarily the interior walls.
So breathable or needing to breathe then means air needs to get at it. Otherwise it just
Traps
kind of...
moisture.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and then it kind of causes a lot. But they're a great source of knowledge, conservation technology, and we would often get advice from
Consult
them.
them.
Yeah, consult them on certain particular projects. But they're incredible.
They're very good,
Yeah.
very good, full of knowledge.
They have so many products.
When I painted my last house, it was all new lime plaster, and we were told you have to use breathable paint. And I saw some brands do like casein, distemper, and all these different kind of breathable versions. And then I looked into it a bit more, and there seemed to be like an air transfer, breathability kind of classification on some paints. So I found that some of the kind of more premium ones, those kind of highly pigmented kind of paints that we're talking about, had this classification that classed it enough as breathable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something to watch out for. But we were
Yeah.
told just don't put up something that's like a jelly paint that has loads
That's
of
it,
binders in
yeah.
it that will act like a plastic layer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So you're kind of safe enough if you check that breathable
sure.
kind
Yeah.
of
And
classification.
there seems to
Interesting.
be more coming onto the market as well. I think maybe in the past it was more specialist, but I think companies and paint brands are more in tune with that at the moment.
Okay. And another one then. So a lot of the breathable paints are kind of water-based. And a lot of paints are water-based nowadays, right? A lot of the oil paints.
Yeah.
Base paints are gone, and they're kind of low VOC, like you mentioned
Yeah.
as well. Your
Yeah.
paints are. So talk to us about
VOC is
that.
the stuff you don't want to be breathing in.
Yes.
Obviously in your house. Yeah. So that's for
Yes.
air quality more than anything. Is it?
Yeah.
VOC, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think historically, it was something that actually put me off coming into the painting industry years ago. Was that it was always considered like quite toxic. The materials that the painter was using, and maybe the painter's cough or whatever you might have. So that kind of put me off initially coming into it, but then as the years have gone on, the water based has incredible quality nowadays, where previously maybe it was literally just water based paint, where there's lots of different properties in it now that make it far greater that we think than the oil based.
Yeah. So VOCs, they stand for volatile organic compounds. So you want to try and steer clear of them as much as possible. There is always an element of them because they are part of the binder in an ingredient. But so ours are, depending on the different finishes, it's 0 VOC, which means it's a certain level of less than 5 grams per litre. And then there's a low VOC, which is I think less than 30 grams. So there are certain classifications that brands have to follow for that. But it's so important because I think maybe people are so conscious about what they're putting into their body in terms of their food and their health, but actually when you're surrounded, if you're painting your house, like you need to be looking for odorless and the correct materials to be breathing in.
That's another positive about it, though. You don't have to evacuate your house, right?
Well,
when you're
that's-
painting.
yeah.
Because you used to have to be gone for days after,
Yeah.
like wait for
Smell
days
it,
after.
yeah.
Yeah. And then is that much better for longevity? Because I know oil-based paints tend to discolor over time. The oil just kind of goes yellow.
Yeah.
Is that different then with water-based paint? You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to worry about that in the water-based paint from our experience anyways.
No, absolutely not. Like that's the unfortunate part about the oil base is that the oil would rise to the surface or whatever, and it would yellow your typical white woodwork.
We would rarely use oil based on projects, like as in 99%, I would say, unless it's been specified.
Yeah, no, I can't remember. I can't remember the last time we used it.
Yeah, it is interesting.
It's more environmentally friendly too. Like so,
exactly.
Yeah, it's cool. So would you recommend, so everyone thinks they can try their hand at painting, right?
My
We
mother,
talked about this.
if you're listening, always
My
thinks she
mother
can paint.
too, she's always like, I'm a great painter. Yeah, just paint it yourself. Everyone thinks they can have a go at it. And it nearly broke me and my husband when we painted our last house, nearly caused a divorce. So would you guys ever recommend painting yourself? And a few tips if someone decides to.
I mean, I would recommend it. I mean, I love seeing people having a go, I guess, but never underestimate it.
Yeah.
I would write down a plan, especially if it's husband and wife painting for each other. I would write down a plan. If you have a full-time job and there's children involved, I mean, it's a hectic schedule as it is.
Yeah.
So you may only have 2 or 3 hours, if even, in the evening. So that will 2, 3, 4 week project all of a sudden. So I would.
Tough work.
It's tough
really
work.
tough work.
Yeah,
It's
and
relentless.
it's quite technical. Like I don't want anyone to underestimate, getting the edges right, making sure that you have enough coverage, using the right materials, making sure that you don't injure your shoulder, your neck.
Yeah.
my
You
goodness,
really have to be careful. Yeah.
Building
lots of
kind of scaffolds for high spots. And
Yeah.
stuff in your
Well,
house.
that's another level.
But like stretching up on ladders, people do it, don't they? Just
Yeah,
walk
yeah.
up in corners and stuff.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the right equipment, it is dangerous.
Yeah, and I suppose then even after you put in all that hard work, your paint could fail, which I suppose
Yes.
maybe Al, you might advise. What are the tips to not fail at painting?
No pressure. So yeah, well, historically, what we have seen from DIYers would be skipping the prep. And I was asked by a client recently, what's the time frame for finishing a project? And they said, well, you're almost done with the prep. And I said, well, actually, it's almost 70-30.
Yeah.
So 70% of our or any project, our painting project, should be the prep, and that's like isolating the area, sanding, filling, priming, like all that matters before a bucket of paint comes into the room.
Yeah.
Do you think you can just cover it all over a paint and it just doesn't work like that at all? Like it needs to be a
just
very
looks
well
crap.
blank canvas
Yeah.
that is
and
perfectly smooth. Yeah.
and if like there recently in Sandymount, we were preparing a front door, the interior of the front door, and one of our guys literally just went with a scraper, and it was like he was scraping butter out of a.
Oh wow.
It's just all appealing.
We're just all peeling off. And the previous owner or DIYer or painter,
They're not all perfect.
painted over varnish. So directly over varnish with probably
No
no
proper
sanding, no
priming.
cleaning, all of that. I can't disclaim enough how much that matters.
So it's all in the prep. That's what we're hearing.
Huge.
All in the prep.
And
Huge.
you mentioned there like painting over varnish. So that was a question from a lot of people. The right primers
Yeah.
and the right prepping the surface in general. So what would you recommend if there was an old glass paint or something or old varnish?
Yeah, so the right primers are essential. The steps to say repainting a varnished door from my side would be you'd sand, you'd clean, you'd prime, you'd sand, you'd clean.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you'd sand the first coat of primer
Yeah.
and then prime it again. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. I used to hate sanding when I was so when I started, I used to hate sanding. There was no machines around. It was all very much hand sanding, and you'd be broke. Your heart would be broke by the end of the day. So I served my time in appreciating sanding, and a lot of people, because of it's so hard. So it's actually people skip over it because it's like, oh God, that is just horrendous. So that would be the steps for me.
But there are machines now.
There are machines,
to
yeah.
sand it, so it's a bit easier. So worth investing in that, I suppose, if you're painting over something. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have Festool sanders, and again, we get asked questions by guys in the industry or girls in the industry, and they'd say, do you think it's worth the investment? And I can't express enough how much it's worth the
Do you know, I
investment.
think I have to blame you actually, Alan. The fact that I own a Festool. We own a Festool. My husband bought the Festool dust extraction system in 2 orbital sanders. So the square
my
pad kind of one
goodness.
and
Brilliant.
125, right?
Hey,
So that's what we...
every tool.
Yeah.
I know. I don't. My husband is addicted to tools, and he saw this And he
Yeah.
saw you using it on your Instagram, and he said, we have to get one of these festuals. Like, he's always into it. And he was like, look at this.
Yeah.
So now we own a festual. No, we are
Brilliant.
not professional painters. And even I say it was totally worth the investment.
Yeah.
Because the amount of work I've been able to do in the house and not have to leave and bring stuff outside or whatever.
Yeah.
So true.
And it's completely dust-free.
Yeah, and you'll never get the same finish. Like, it's such an elevated finish with the Fez tool or any machine sander compared to hand sanding.
What is it? Spell it. Fez tool.
Festool.
Festool, okay.
So like,
Well, because the dust is a nightmare. Like,
Yeah.
anyone trying to clean up after somebody has been in and the house been renovated, like, it is nearly impossible to get all the dust off. It's
the
really
dust
important to not
extraction
get it out in the
system
first
is
place.
like tiny particle. I don't know what the rating is exactly, but essentially you'll be dust free.
Yeah.
Even if you're kind of sanding. Now, I haven't sanded plaster with it. He's trying to convince me to buy the drywall sander. And I'm like, do I really need to buy the drywall sander?
Yeah.
Apparently we do. So watch the space. I might have the drywall sander. to test
So you're
next.
asking, is it worth it? Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Ian, don't listen to it.
Yeah, for us, because our approach is to provide the best possible finish in every home,
Yeah.
you can't do that.
No.
Yeah.
With dust everywhere and
yeah.
the guys breathing in dust.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the finish, as Rachel said, it just is not.
No.
It's not comparable in any way, shape, or form.
No.
So essentially it's sand, fill, repeat, sand, fill, repeat.
Yes,
Sand, fill,
absolutely.
repeat.
Yeah.
And then maybe paint. After that
Maybe.
guy.
Yeah. At the end.
Another thing I have to blame for the festival thing, actually. A house around the corner you were painting because your vans were outside there for a few weeks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my husband said, wow, they have sanded and filled that door like 3 times. He saw you
Yes.
doing the hall door or
Yeah.
your guys doing the
Yes.
hall door. And like the whole door was filled in sand and then it was sanded back and he was like, oh, we're ready for painting now. And the cast the next day and he'd be like, they're sanding it again. He's like, they're sanding it again.
They
He
doing?
could not get over it.
Yeah.
And then he was like, we have to do our door like that.
Yeah.
So then my whole door came off.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Our whole door, and he was like, we're going to refinish our whole door, Kate. And I was like, cool, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm blaming
At least
you.
Yeah.
providing a bit of inspiration. I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So sand at least twice with a Fez tool is the key takeaway.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think you'll ever regret investing in good tools if you're
No.
doing any kind of level of DIY yourself.
Yeah, and just quickly on the DIY, like patience, as Kate said there, the sanding, the filling, the sanding, the filling, the priming. Oh, it's ready for paint. No, patience. You're gonna live with the finish for a long time.
Yeah.
Like it's probably gonna take whatever the project size is. Just say 2 weeks. How long are you going to live with it with the finish then? So make sure
delay the
you've
painting.
given it your best.
Yeah.
And patience, I would say.
Yeah.
And you said before, Alan, 70% prep and then 30% actually painting the thing,
Yeah.
which I think is
Crazy,
really
isn't
good.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's okay. So that's sanding and prepping. What about filling? Like, what if, even to take a step back, what if you to remove something from the wall, be it the varnish, for example? So that's kind of sanded down. What if it's wallpaper? You know, what if there's a chunk taken out of the wall, or you need to smooth the surface? What are your tips there for?
So we have another Fez tool.
We are not sponsored by Fez tool. I want you to hear it.
ears.
Although please get in touch.
I think we should be. Yeah.
And what we've called it is the bazooka in the Farrelly Co team, but actually it's called a Planex or Planex, Planex, and basically it's a extendable and a large, maybe football size head on it, and that runs over the walls or ceilings for us, so it covers a much greater space, and it's also easier on the guys when they're holding it. So it's actually suction on it so great that you can let it go.
Okay. Hold itself to the wall.
It holds itself to the wall. So the guys
Wild.
aren't. Yeah, so it's insane. The tools that this festival have, they really have thought about the tradesman or the DIYer.
Yeah.
Can you rent them? Can you rent those tools?
I don't know about Festool now. I've seen
don't
other
know.
brands, but I've never seen Festool because I suppose they're
Just
still
did it once, you know.
I can rent them from you, I'm sure.
Do you think my husband would let anyone use that? Even when I use it, he's watching me over my shoulder, being like, "You're knocking the head now off that. Now, what do you do?"
Okay, so that gets it nice and smooth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We would do a lot of, I think you were asking about removing wallpaper. So obviously you're not really too sure what your walls are going to look like once you remove the wallpaper. And that's always a risk until you start. You really have no idea. But we, on our team, would always do skim coats as well, which I know is slightly more elevated and more complex for the DIYer, but again, completely
Gives you
worth
that
it for
perfect
the
finish.
finish. Yeah.
So, sometimes you can be quite lucky when you remove the wallpaper and actually the walls are quite sound underneath.
Yeah.
But generally in period
That's
homes.
very lucky.
Yeah.
In my experience.
Yeah, in
doesn't
period homes, it's
happen.
not the case.
Yeah.
And do you know what I found as well? A lot of the wallpapers that were put up were some sort of metallic-y, plasticky wallpaper at some point in time, which weren't breathable.
Oh,
So therefore, the lime plaster has crumbled underneath from damp.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
Because the actual like papers, you know, that horrible stripy metallic or paisley print or whatever from whenever they put it, 60s or 70s or whatever. And I found those are really hard to strip as well because the steamer doesn't even penetrate the plasticky surface. So I was kind of scraping bit by bit by bit. But in my experience, wallpaper rarely covers perfect walls.
No.
And especially if it's the fucking wood chip wallpaper stuff.
Yeah.
That's always crap walls underneath.
Dread.
Like crumbling ceilings, shit walls. So we said this in one of our first episodes. Be careful when you buy an old home and you go in, you're like, I'm going to rip off all the wallpaper. I'm like, be careful. It might literally be holding your walls together.
So,
And that actually is very true. So it's, some clients would say to me, I'm thinking of removing the wallpaper, and it may be just lining paper, and that has been painted over repeatedly. And I would say, actually, don't. The safer option is to, because God knows what is beneath there.
Yeah.
And what we would generally do is put reinforcement tape, mesh tape over the joints of the wallpaper and skim that.
Amazing.
And so
That's
then,
interesting to know now.
Then you don't see that it is actually wallpaper, and it's much more uniform.
Let the professionals at it, basically.
So if someone wasn't a DIY then, so it's really hard to know, is a painter a good painter? So is your advice if a painter comes in and you're maybe getting some prices that they talk about that, the prep steps?
I actually think Rachel's the research queen here. So you could, like when we're going on holidays, Rachel.
I'm very detail orientated, and even my own, like you need to research who you're getting to work on your house. So whether that's referrals from your friends, whether you follow them on Instagram. And I think that's always something that we've been really conscious of, is to be very transparent about what we're doing in people's homes. So people are maybe slightly more educated in, oh God, they do need to be sanding and they do need to be filling. And probably the basic as well is to, I know when Alan goes into his consultations, he would describe exactly what the plans to do. The quote obviously would need to be detailed in what you're going to be paying for. And then from a more basic level, like, are they insured? Are they VAT registered? That's all the basics to make sure that it is a professional painting company. And that's something we'd be quite passionate about, is there is a lot of companies out there that maybe aren't as professional as they could be. And that's unfortunate then, because it does give a slight bad name to the industry. And people maybe aren't so trusting. But I think by putting your research into who you're going to go with, talking to them, do you like them? Do you know, like
that was my step number one, is for everyone that you're working with in this whole process, like, it's a working relationship. 100%. So communication is key. It has to be there. And I think if you get a good, if somebody is responsive and they're communicative and they're open about what they're planning to do, then I think it's such a good sign that they're going to do a good job.
Absolutely, exactly. And I think it's a very high stress environment when you are doing renovations. It's a lot of money, people's savings. It's a huge job. So unless you have that relationship there, and if there isn't open communication, it's going to make the whole process much harder.
And you think you're saving money in the short run, but really in the long run you're not.
So I've heard some horror stories with clients whereby it be builders, carpenters, painters, they've been burnt by them either not returning or not answering to snags, or maybe a botched job. So research is key. A presence on social media is huge. We think that's one of the main reasons why we launched our Instagram page. Is it's hard to put a figure on it, but 70-80% of our work comes through Instagram, and they've already been sold on us when we arrive to do the project. Because they can see and they trust our process.
There's a bit of transparency, I suppose, in somebody who's putting themselves out there publicly, because I mean, if there's loads of comments underneath all the posts saying like, come back and finish my house, or do this,
exactly.
You're putting yourself out there for sure. Okay, so the next area that we got loads of questions about, and this is the place that I messed up in my first house, was picking the right colours, right? So we had a lot of questions about, good off-whites, both for the walls and for trim. And then, like, is pure brilliant white ever the right answer? So, like, just general, like, whites, especially for our Irish kind of light, which is like cold,
quite great.
And what direction is your room facing in? And when are you usually in that room? What type of lighting do you have in that room? How do you pick based on that?
And I think you touched on it as well in the colours episode, but the amount of questions that you would get, what colour should I put in this room? But there's so many different variables, like the aspect of the room when you use the room, artificial light, natural light, what you're currently working with in terms of your own furniture, you know. And I think the most important thing, like, it goes back to the undertones. If you're trying to pair colors, you need to look at the undertones, and there's so many different elements that all need to come together to make that room look right. Which is really hard. Like, it is really hard. So
It is
you
hard.
understand why people maybe don't get it right the first time, and you're in the industry, you know. So off-whites, I would always probably steer clear of like a stark white.
They can tend to look quite blue, can't they? Well, I don't know, it's
can.
like just
And
very
I
light.
think grey as well, because we've a lot of grey in our sky, a lot of grey coming through the window.
lot of
And
blue
if you
light.
just, you know, if you've white
Yes.
with no undertones, it's typically just going to reflect what's being shone
quite
on it.
clean.
Quite
And that's
icy
typically
cold.
grey.
Icy cold.
Icy,
Yeah, and we were talking about this in our lighting episode even, like cold white spots. I don't even know why people use them. Maybe it's for different climates or different lights or different countries.
Yeah.
But
But
they're
like,
doing surgery in their kitchen.
yeah, but like,
It
you
can
always
be
want a bit of
harsh.
warmth, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe in this country.
And
just
also,
like,
I think,
more.
like, when you're, say, if you have a pink on your wall and you put a white with that, it's just going to clash. Whereas if you were to go for a white with a pink undertone to it,
Yeah.
it will look white against the pink, but it won't be harsh.
a bit softer, yeah.
Softer, and I think that's
Yeah.
really coming through a lot more. Kind of like the tone on tone colors.
I love that. I almost love, like, spoke about this in the colour episode, but almost that leaning into that monochrome colour where you have
Yes.
lots of different shades of the same tone.
Yeah, like layers and layers of it. Like
It's
even in
so
your furnishing.
interesting. Yeah, I
It's a lot
love
more
Words.
luxurious as well in the home. Like, there's just so many different layers of and depth in the
I'm going
house.
to say depth,
Yeah.
much more depth and story to
Exactly.
it. Yeah.
I think it looks great as well, especially in small rooms, because it does bring in that depth. It's a great trick of the eye. I think
Yes.
it's lovely. Yeah.
I actually have a blue, navy blue kind of upholstered bed in my guest room, and I always had white bed linen on it, right? Always. And I had this deep kind of foresty, greeny blue kind of bed linen set, and I just put it on one day, and I was like, oh my god, it looks 10 times better. The room looked 10 times better. It's just like all the layers of kind of dark, deep colours. Like the room
changes,
looked
yeah.
immediately looked cozier and whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that kind of
Yeah,
just
it's
layers
really
of
nice.
different shades and tones. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so that's kind of whites, off-white. So look for the undertones. What's your favorite kind of off-white? Your own brand, and maybe
From our own brand, since we've launched Trig, has
Okay.
just been the most popular warm neutral off-white. And that, so it's an off-white with sort of taupe undertones to it.
lovely.
It seems to work well in, a lot of different living rooms, hallways, well on woodwork, in all different finishes, the eggshell and the matte. So that seems to be really, really popular. Other brands, I think Colourtrend, is it Milk Teeth or
I actually had a
Yeah.
question from someone about milk teeth and what we thought of
Yeah.
it. That was
It's-
very specific.
It's, I suppose, if you're looking for a white,
What's the undertone to that now?
slightly warm undertone to it.
lovely.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is still quite bright white though.
Okay.
It wouldn't be a brilliant white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what I saw recently is, I was in a hotel, and you actually had this in your kitchen as well, with a kind of a green undertone, which I love, because I think it almost
Can.
achieves what Magnolia set out.
The kitchen looked like it was
to achieve.
Magnolia.
No,
Only joking.
people had Magnolia because they wanted a bit of warmth and a bit of
Yeah,
sunshine,
yeah.
and okay, it's gone now and
Yeah.
should never come back.
Yeah.
But I actually feel like paint with a green undertone really achieves that
Yeah.
in a much more sophisticated way.
I find it very calm, actually.
Yeah, we actually have a lovely colour called Sandycove, and that has a green undertone to it, but it's still kind of a creamy beige. But
Gorgeous.
because of the green undertone, it's really fresh rather than sort of like a heavy warm.
Exactly, it's
lovely.
fresh. We
Yeah.
spoke about this, but yellow undertones sometimes can look a bit dirty.
Yeah,
Yeah, like you've been
Yeah.
smoking in that room
Yes,
for years or
yeah,
something.
but
Yeah,
green-
which
the
the green
green's
is
lovely.
real
It's really,
crisp
really
and
nice.
fresh, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good tip for kind of the green undertone.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to colours in a second, but you just mentioned there eggshell, matte. Can you just give a breakdown of finishes and where the right finishes go before we get back to colours? Because we didn't touch on this, I don't think,
No,
on
no,
that
we
episode,
don't
and
need
it's
to
really
know.
important. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Alan, do you want to answer that one?
Okay, yeah. So during my training into the industry, historically it's gloss, eggshell, satin on woodwork. So eggshell would be the lowest sheen of the three.
Okay.
Satin then would be mid sheen. It would have quite a sheen to it.
Okay.
My preference is eggshell.
Is that like sheen percent, like the 10-20%, or
No,
what?
I think it's
set at
7.
I
Oh,
think.
it's that much?
wow.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I think it's 7%.
And then satin is
Ireland
up higher again. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
10-15%. Okay.
Yeah, and then gloss.
Gloss, yeah.
Like getting back to the magnolia, it was magnolia and white gloss, brilliant white gloss
Yeah.
for years.
Yeah.
Us, I don't think there's ever. Well, probably front door.
Front
Door.
Yeah.
I've actually seen a few. Like another thing I'm addicted to watching is front door restoration. And there's some guy, I can't remember his name now, I'll find it on Instagram, but he does restoration of these wrecked front doors and then paints them in glass. And
glass.
it's like a mirror.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just
I
like,
also
yeah.
I got advice, and I didn't do it because I didn't have the guts for it. But I got advice to paint my ceilings in a small place with a high glass. Have you ever seen that? Because it was to bounce more light around, make it more reflective, make it feel a little bit bigger. I didn't end up doing it, and I haven't really seen it, but I just thought it was an interesting suggestion.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Definitely a statement, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like in a small space, we would recommend, like a wet room, say, we would recommend an eggshell for a sheen on,
Okay.
like for moisture to be able to not penetrate the
Gotcha.
surface,
Yeah.
to sit
Yeah.
To sit on the surface. If you had matte in a bathroom or a WC, very much the walls the moisture would penetrate
Yeah,
the walls,
yeah.
which
Gotcha.
is
Also less durable as well.
For sure, yeah. Someone actually asked that about a kitchen paint finish. So another mistake I made in my first house, I did a completely matte kitchen.
I have a
really,
completely matte kitchen.
really,
Yeah.
really low sheen. Like, I don't know what the sheen was in
Yeah.
it, but it was so impossible to keep clean.
Yeah.
It does.
You
I
saw-
find either end of the spectrum, you're going to show up fingerprints. So if you
Yeah.
have high gloss or
Yes.
if you have full matte,
Yeah.
especially if you have a handleless kitchen, you will show up fingerprints.
Yeah.
I personally
Mid-range
think for a
difficult.
kitchen, 10% is the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
like
for sure,
it's
for sure.
wipeable. It's
Yeah.
like it's so
Yeah.
much easier
just for your
to maintain.
sanity alone. Yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
We
Totally
always
matte in a
use
kitchen, just steer clear.
Yeah. We would always use an eggshell, really. That would be our
For a kitchen.
for kitchen cabinets. Yeah.
So what about walls then? What would you usually do for a wall?
Matte.
Matte on a wall. Yeah.
No, we have two finishes, and most paint brands would have a few finishes of matte. Ours is silk matte and pure matte. So silk has maybe a 3 or 4% sheen, and that is our most cleanable, wipeable.
Yeah. Higher
okay.
traffic. So
Okay.
always.
So that tiny bit of sheen.
So a few
technically
kids or
it-
something and
Children's
they're, yeah,
bedroom,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Technically, it doesn't probably have a matte look to it,
Yeah.
but it's our lowest sheen in the matte division.
Okay.
That's
For
cool.
small kids, it might be worth going for the couple of percent sheen to make it a
Yes.
bit more watchable.
Absolutely,
Yeah. And the
yeah.
hallway,
Good to
you
know.
know, like those sort of areas. the high
But it's
traffic
important to
areas.
note that, like, once the prep is done right, you can put matte if your sanity allows it anywhere. Like, you can put it on the doors, and sometimes it looks really cool, maybe in a reception room or a living space where there's not much traffic and the kids aren't going with their
Fingerprints.
greasy hands and
Yeah.
stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
It can look really luxurious and
Yeah, like velvety.
velvety.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I
But-
did dead
love
flat on all my woodwork
nice.
in my
Nice.
last house.
Yeah.
So I like data rail, whatever, the picture rail on the skirting.
Yeah.
But it catches dust like
So
it's so rough. Like
Yeah.
it really has to be. And an old home, like no matter what you do to these old houses, they're dusty. Like they
Yeah.
just are. It comes
Yeah.
through the floorboards, it comes through the wall, it comes through everywhere. So like I just think dead flat, like it's just hard to maintain.
Yeah,
It's a new
I
build.
know. I know. There's a fine balance as well between aesthetics and practicality as well. So I think you probably
Yeah.
just need to look at what works for you and your home and your family,
Yeah.
and that's your decision maker really. Oh, well, unless you want to keep cleaning it.
Unless you want to keep
I
all the
would like
time.
a contrast as well. Like if you're doing, say, dead flat on walls or on
Yeah.
data rails, I'd love, it depends on the colours you're going for, but I do love a gloss against that. Maybe it's on your skirting or on
Yeah.
your
Yeah, it's
door
cool
or
features.
something. I
That's
think
nice
it can look
texture,
nice.
doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it does
Yeah.
add
Yeah.
texture.
And what about, you're talking about contrast in the woodwork, color drenching versus contrast trim versus like, so some people have color match to the wall, some people have it white trim, like they like that crisp white trim, and then some people go darker on the trim
Yes.
than the walls.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? What's the most popular nowadays?
Color drenching is really popular.
Yeah.
But then I think probably less popular would be the darker color on the trim. I suppose it's more of a bold
Yeah.
move
I've
and a
seen
bold
lot of
statement.
UK houses. A lot of UK period
yeah.
houses seems to be very like black staircases and all that. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot in UK homes. Less here.
Yeah, we did one recently. That looked amazing. The black staircase, and then they had like a black runner going up, and the walls
That's
were all
class.
white.
Yeah,
it was really
amazing.
clean and really crisp. But in terms of like, say your architraves or your doors, it's still a neutral.
Yeah.
It's still a different
Okay.
tone.
Yeah.
Mostly.
yeah.
That's what we're seeing, anyways.
And one question that came up was an off-white for your trim. rather than just the pure brilliant white, but it's still that clean, crisp white. Is there a white that you kind of recommend for that? Would something like milk teeth, like we discussed before, be suitable for wood? Or is that too...
Yeah.
Before we launched our own paint, milk teeth was the most requested.
Really?
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah.
I hear Arctic Blonde talked about.
I love Arctic
all
Blonde.
the
It's one of my
time.
favourites
as well.
Is that
Yeah.
good luck for
really
you
good.
guys?
That to me
It's
is
brighter.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
it doesn't have as much warmth to it, but I think it looks really nice.
Yeah.
that to me is quite close to, I suppose, brilliant white. It's probably
Yeah.
their it's
I
probably
thought
their
it was very
widest white.
cold
Yeah,
when
yeah.
I tried it.
Yeah, and Arctic Blonde would probably describe it quite well. That
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
that it's
Yeah,
quite
and it
cold.
is. It is a
Yeah.
cold colour, but I
Yeah.
do really like
But
it.
milk teeth's an interesting name, and yeah, we've seen that pop up quite a bit. Actually, I would say the majority of, if they were choosing Colourtrend the client, it would have been milk teeth. And what we're seeing now is Bond. Our whitest white is Bond. That has a warmth to it,
Yeah, it has a yellow.
and then Trig.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So another one that came up was when you're painting, some of the technical bits, like caulking. Do I paint caulk? Do I not paint caulk?
Yeah, so caulk is paintable. It's very much paintable. Silicone is not. So it's called painter's caulk in that it is a paintable. So whatever finish you're looking to do, you can paint it, absolutely, yeah.
So paint it, if it's say a junction between like the skirting and the wall, do you paint the caulk the same colour as the skirting or the wall? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, so that does depend. If you're taping before caulk, if you tape a cabinet edge all the way down and then you caulk it, you're only painting the wall side because your cabinet is covered. And that can vary on skirting boards. It can vary depending where you want to strike your line.
Gotcha.
So
if there's a big wide gap to the wall, you might paint it the same colour as the skirting to marry it in with the skirting.
Yes.
But if it's up the wall a little bit more, you paint it to match the wall.
yes,
essentially.
essentially. Yeah.
Okay, so that's caulking. Another question we got in terms of like technical painting know-how, masking. People can't seem to find a good masking tape, and like you guys as painters probably wouldn't use mask for cut-ins and stuff like that. You probably do cut-ins and stuff freehand, would you? For the most part?
We can, but like, and
That's a skill now.
Yeah,
That's
that is
really
a skill.
skill. A very, very steady hand for that. I don't know.
and our painters can, but I don't think you cannot rival a machine edged razor sharp tape. You just cannot.
Okay.
So for us, we use tape everywhere, and we get stick from the.
What tape do you use? Do you have a brand?
we use low tack Fleetwood tape.
Okay.
Low tack feature. And does that pull the paint off afterwards? When do you use it? When do you put it on? Do you take it off when the paint's wet? Leave it dry? What do you do?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. This. So what you would do is you'd paint your skirt. If you're talking about skirtings, you paint your skirtings. Then you apply your tape over your skirting. Strike a nice line.
Once they're dry.
Once they're dry, yeah, exactly.
Very dry.
Yeah.
once it's cured.
Yeah. So maybe the next day you tape your skirtings. Then what we would do is we would run the color of the skirting over the tape to create that sealant. So anything that will bleed through will be the skirting color.
Okay.
Then that dries. There's lots of steps to this, and then you paint what you cut in your wall. Then you cut in your wall, roll your wall, 2 coats, remove the tape.
When it's still wet or when it's still dry?
It can be dry, but it can stay there for a day.
The key is low tack though.
It's low tack,
Yeah.
low tack, absolutely. And a very good tip is to make sure you run the skirting color or whatever it might be on the tape, so it creates that sealant and it doesn't bleed through.
Okay.
I think it's quite a good one.
Okay.
So-
So that basically, when you're saying sealant, that seals the tape so that if
Yeah.
you get a splat on the tape,
Yeah.
it's not going to bleed through into the colour underneath it of the skirting.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Because sometimes there's air pockets or whatever.
Yeah.
Make sure you give it a good run through with your thumb. But if you don't do that, basically you're cutting in with the wall color, and all of a sudden you've got jaggedy edges.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
We have a bedroom in our house that has kind of a curved ceiling, right, where the eaves kind of cut off the room, and we had to make a line because there's no line between the ceiling and the wall, and they were different colors. So we got this tip online. I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but we masked the wall and then we smeared a tiny bit of caulk along that top edge of mask,
Okay.
and then we painted.
So you
top
did
colour.
have a little...
And then we pull the mask at 90 degrees. So you kind of did what you were doing down at the skirting level, but on the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because someone asked us, like, how do you do that if you want to colour, half and half on a wall or vertical stripes or something like that? It's kind of that smear creates your little barrier
yeah,
for bleed
absolutely.
through.
Yeah, that's very clever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, because I suppose, is that then, because another thing you could have done, I suppose, is stick up a little bit of data roll, like a thin little data roll, but is that's almost like an invisible version of that nearly.
Yeah.
That you do have a little bit of a line there, and there's
Yeah.
there is an actual divide, but it's not.
Another
you
thing
kind
I
of a fake
suppose
line.
is that a lot of the time in those smaller rooms, we would actually paint the ceiling the same color as the wall.
I think we should have, to be honest.
Yeah.
When I went back, I was like, why did we paint this?
As that one wall or as all the walls? Just the whole
So
thing.
just paint
The
the,
whole
ceiling
Yeah.
room
the
the same colour.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you really, obviously how light hits in every single room, it will look like a different color anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
And it
Yeah.
saves you the fine
hassle.
details.
Yeah, the ceiling always has a
and-
bit more of a shadow on it
Yeah.
anyway. It's a bit darker. So
Yeah.
it kind of,
Yeah.
Okay, so we've kind of covered most of the questions, but one question, I suppose, to finish would be your favorite paint color ever, ever,
of
ever.
any brand.
Any brand. Maybe you can pick your own brand as well.
Yeah, of course,
As well,
of course.
but one of each.
So Edward Bulmer is a English paint company. They've really good ethos as well, really natural pigments in all their paints, and they do this incredible bright, zesty green, and it's called
Ooh.
Invisible Green. And if you go onto their Instagram, they have such amazing color combinations. I mightn't necessarily put it on my kitchen cabinets or in my hallway, but just for like color inspiration, incredible account. But yeah, Invisible Green, Zesty Green, they pair with like oranges, they pair
Oh,
with
wow.
like blues.
Oh, wow, look at it.
Yeah.
I'm just Googling here.
Oh
myself.
Yeah.
my goodness,
That's
I love it.
amazing.
Oh, look
Yeah.
that up.
You can imagine that in an old house.
Yeah, exactly. And a
That's
lot of,
fabulous.
I think that's sort of their direction is in all those sort of old homes in
amazing.
estates in England.
That's it would be cool.
Yeah,
It actually
It's almost like
surprising.
soccer pitch
It's
green.
fun, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
It's
very
really
playful, yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Surprisingly goes with a lot of other colours
Yeah.
as well. Like the pairings there are really
Pink.
working.
The pink.
Pink, oh my God,
Yellow.
it's amazing with
It's
the pink.
amazing with the pink.
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
It's a
would be
great inspirational account as well, just for maybe, stepping out of the box a little bit and choosing color combinations you wouldn't
Beautiful.
necessarily pick. And then for one of our colors, Fremantle. So it's this like deep aubergine plummy
Oh.
color, which looks incredible when it's color drenched or
What you were
paired.
aiming for in your first house.
No, and I think London Clay was kind of somewhat like that aubergine.
Aubergine, and I think all those colors are really coming through in 2024. Those much
Yeah.
more richer colors, the saturated colors. And I think people are taking more risks as well, which is
Yeah.
great in terms of their colors. So either color drenched in a room, or even like, say, we've seen it like in the interior of like a cabinet, or like a coffee cabinet. So there's different ways you can bring in those sort of more out there colors.
Without taking too much of it.
Yeah, because it's still kind
Safe
of
for me.
subtle in a way too.
Love that.
Jen, what's your favorite color?
I love India yellow from
Oh,
Farrow
I
Ball.
love it.
Yellow's my favorite
Yeah.
colour anyway, and I really
Not
love
dissimilar to your light over our head, actually.
light over head. Quite similar to the couch. My
Yeah.
full line couch in turmeric is a similar colour. I actually do have it on the inside of my
Oh, do you?
kitchen
Okay,
cabinet
yeah.
as well, just for a nice little pop on my
Yeah.
front door.
Nice.
I love yellow. I find it so cheerful and
Yeah.
lovely, but a bright yellow is a bit too much for me. This is, if you look at the sample, it looks really dark, too dark. But actually, when you have it on a big surface, it's lovely and bright and
Yeah.
I just love it.
Okay.
Yeah. What's yours?
Of the ones I've used, I would say I loved my old dining room, London Clay. Color drenched everywhere. It's
Yeah.
just especially for a room that got no natural light.
Exactly, embrace
It's
it.
just go for the
Yeah,
darkness.
yeah,
We
I
had
love
black
that.
marble fireplace, everything.
Yeah.
I nearly would have gone to the coving in the ceilings, but we didn't get that far. We were out of the house fast enough. But if I was to do like an everyday kind of like all over my house paint color, I actually love Schoolhouse white. I think it's a lovely warm undertone.
Yeah.
It's soft, kind of off white, but has a bit of depth.
Yeah,
So I think they're my two favorites.
It's a luxurious looking colour.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, I think we managed to cover a lot there. So I think that's hopefully answered everybody's questions. And thanks again for sending them in. Rachel and Alan, I mean, we covered a lot of colours there, but there's a billion more, approximately, billions and billions more. What do you advise people to do if they still have questions and they're not sure about what colour to choose?
Well, get in touch with us, I suppose. Instagram, email, and then we're actually also are going to be at the Ideal Home Show in April, towards the end of April. I think it's the last weekend. So we're going to be offering free colour consultations there too. And it's also going to be the first time that we're going to be publicly displaying our brand. So really exciting time for us.
Really? Okay,
yeah.
amazing.
Definitely
So
drop one.
Ideal Home Show in the RDS at the end of April. Go and check out Farrelly Co. And
Do
thank
a
you so
colour
much.
consult.
Do a free colour consult, get your house sorted. And thank you so much for coming and answering so many questions. We really
Thanks
gritted
a
there.
million,
So
guys.
we
It's
appreciate all that
Amazing.
great advice.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening, guys. See you soon.
See you in the next episode. If you found that episode useful, please do us a huge favour by giving us a like and a few stars, and especially click that subscribe button. Thank you.